So now go to location materials, and Chris had a question, hey, if you go to the grid view and put in your filter bar, please, right click, filter bar. It's going to maximize this.
I got a quick question.
Now I have 366 items in my inventory location database because I only have one inventory location so far because we're picking on 04 Pure Water to be our little guinea pig. And we put in the 366 PW items into there so that we built ourselves a physical inventory. Yes.
What if I go through in materials and add materials like you were saying to the pure water categories?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to just bring the ones and twos, say I had 20 items to 5 different categories in the PWs. What if I went back to that initialize and it isn't going to double up, is it? It's only going to bring in the new ones in a pen?
Okay, yeah, and the reason is, now one thing about this, then this is global in the system. You see this little double bar here? Everything to the left is the primary key of each table.
Okay.
The primary key cannot have a duplicate because the primary key says this is what I keep track of this thing by.
Okay.
So the primary key of HQ materials is material ID. The primary key of the inventory location materials is inventory location 04 for Pure Water Warehouse, and that, so it won't let you double it up.
Okay.
So if you go and do that same range again after you do 20, a little thing will pop and say 20 added, because it is not going to duplicate the primary key.
Okay.
Makes sense?
But if you were pushing those same,
Database standpoint?
if you selected those same items, you could push them into a different location
Sure.
because then the location is different.
Exactly.
Would they update other parts of the table, like append to a record, or is it just omitted? If it's
It just bypasses it.
It just bypasses, so it's not an update.
Yeah, you'd have to keep it up over here. And there is an import to this if we wanted to import and keep this up separately.
Okay.
So let's go to the info tab, just because it's easier to see what's going on in here. What kind of stuff are we tracking in this system?
Well, if I do a lookup and I
Okay.
get SGL.
Last unit cost. On that headquarters material, he brought over a unit cost for everything. So now the system's just using the one he brought over saying, hey, that was my last unit cost. Low stock, reorder quantity, that physical location is the bin number, or the bid, that's where you could put anything you want for the bin number or whatever. Okay. Last vendor, since I haven't done a purchase in inventory, doesn't know what last vendor. If I went and did one right now, you'd be like, oh, I bought my last thing from Pure, wherever Pure Water buys most of its stuff from. Yeah.
So if the purchase order was done and that last vendor was filled in there, because we set it up to reflect the last cost, purchase cost, would that last unit cost update if the amount was different?
No, but I can do that.
Oh.
The next tab has, so the standard cost is that, but we average unit costs, but we're not using that dynamically. If we set it to average unit cost, it would have done that little thing I talked about.
Okay.
But last unit cost, it'll remember that last unit cost and stuff. So it's actually on this other tab. So like I said, when I pull it into inventory location materials is the table that controls all of that stuff. Where is my stuff, my quantity on hand, et cetera, et cetera.
How many records does it keep for last cost? Just one?
Yes. Does that make sense? It will have the history, but it remembers the last cost. It will dynamically update the average cost if you do average cost, but it only knows one last cost. But it does know all the history. But
There's a place we could see that in like a report or something to see all the history of the last cost. Okay.
Yeah. So now if I do a purchase order, how many is on order, how many have I received, et cetera, quantity on hand, we didn't bring over any balances yet. So now the system's going to start going into the negatives, only because we haven't done any, physical count entries. We just brought over the items without a physical count. So just like your Maxwell sitting with a bunch of negatives, when we start messing around the testing, it's going to start going into the negatives because we never put our original counts to start drawing from those things. But we would have to do that when we go live. So the system would say, as of my go live date, we did a physical count at the end of the month. Now we're here. And
So
then we
then-
have our ins and outs.
So is that something that can be imported or does that have to be manually? Okay.
Yep, we got imports for that. Okay. So basically, you can see kind of all your stuff, and there's all my discounts. So now I've got a functional location and we can start testing this thing and using this thing and messing around with this thing. Now service, I just want to talk a little bit about service. Does service always purchase stuff, or do they do something similar to Pure Water? Do they have a whole truck full of stuff, and when they go by, they pull stuff off their truck? Because most of my HVAC service companies, they run around, do all this work, and they got a whole bunch of stuff in the back of their truck. If they don't got it, then they'll do a purchase order, because you can't have everything in every scenario to fix every darn thing. But you do have a standard material group of stuff sitting in the back of your truck that gets you 80%, 90% of the way there, and then you get additional stuff as needed. Is that kind of how your service department works?
Well, I mean, I think we hold off on any inventory items until we get service in here. Like
Okay.
on Friday, those are questions we could definitely ask them.
Okay.
Unless you guys know exactly how they work. I know they hold stock in vans, but I don't know.
Yeah, but I don't know exactly.
Because normally what happens is, you know, when if I'm a service technician and I roll out to a job, you know, then I've got labor, so I'm going to put my time to that job. Don showed up, he worked 2 hours fixing that, whatever. And by the way, I reached back into my truck and I used 20 feet of those and 3 of those and 1 of them and 2 of those. And if I'm pulling those out of stock and putting those on my work order, then I can do a markup percent, or if I've got some rate schedules or something, I can start doing stuff to those things. But if I do a purchase order, that means I'm going to a vendor because I'm purchasing just in time. But if I need to be able to grab stuff off of a list of items off my vehicle or truck, normally I have to have that. So that's where we're creating another service location at 03. And then the question is, does he want to have one for each truck? Is he going to take the time to manage the controls of 03 service warehouse and 03 all of his trucks?
I mean, I could speak to like
And
preventative
we'll have the
maintenance.
same conversation.
Like preventative maintenance on jobs at service. You know, they're gonna, what they want, you know, talking with John Payne, our service manager, what he wants to be able to do is have a record of what equipment is on sites, right? And then what equipment, what that needs, like filters, you know, certain things.
Mhm.
And so they can preemptively have that in stock on a van, right? Before they go out and do their preventive maintenance on things, right?
Yeah. And
Keep-
whether he
keep
pulled that out of
schedule
the warehouse or it was a one-off thing, he had to do PO and stop by Ferguson on the way there to grab, because that was not a stock item and that was such a specialty item. We don't necessarily keep a bunch of those on hand. So we stopped by Ferguson on the way to the thing.
That's the part we don't know.
Either thing can happen. And that's normally what I see happening, because you're not going to stop for everything. I need some duct tape. Yeah, let's stop by Ferguson, you know. And
So,
they're going to have a standard set of
Chris,
stuff.
with the service work orders, so, I mean, I see costs on a service work order for different materials or whatever else. So do they typically pull those from the inventory and charge the work order, or do they initiate POs that then hit the work order? Do you know
Most
how
of the
they-
time it's a PO, but they do pull some material off their trucks, which is normally in out of stock.
Pulled from the inventory piece.
Right. And we've done, so there was a point in time that we actually used to inventory each truck and kind of keep track of it, but that went by the wayside years ago. And I had talked to John at one point in time to say, you know, do we ever foresee ourselves, you know, inventorying each truck, keeping track of that, but we've just never, I just don't know that that's his desire down the road, because right now I think we're just kind of keeping track of it as a whole. So whether that's on the forefront, I'm not,
We'll talk to him
we'll probably
about it.
have to revisit it.
As far as your HQ material list, those 16,000 items, are any of those inclusive of a lot of service stuff? Unknown
Hard
at
to
this
say.
time?
I mean, some of it maybe, I mean, if they need certain valves or fit, I mean, it's hard
Yeah,
to say.
that's okay. So that's where we would perhaps need to expand our HQ material item database to include the service items, because if I'm going to put them into a service stock, so we can do what she said and somehow relieve them either at the truck level or at least at the service
Well, the thing is,
warehouse
it may be
level.
the same items
And
that are
they
within there.
they
Yeah.
certainly could be. If he says, hey, let's put all these HP things in there and let's put all those and then I'll give you
Yeah.
another ones, we could
I
certainly
think
build.
most everything
and they
comes
can't
off
do-
of PO, because there's
Because that
very
item
few
can be in
of the
multiple
out of
locations.
stocks that
Gotcha.
go
Does that make sense?
Yep.
stock into
It could be in
but
stock in
there's,
different
you know,
stock
they do like
locations.
Or
gloves,
not in stock.
rags,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
duct tape, or, you know,
I thought it was mostly through POs, but then, I mean, if you issued a PO, how do you, they pull it off their truck and they issue a PO, I don't know enough about how they do that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so let's do a little thing just to show you that this is functional and give you a little feel for how this game is going to work. So if you don't mind, Margaret, let's go to the grid here. Let's pretend that I need a couple of these things. So leave this up here for just a second. Go to Vista, go to the main menu. So now, let's go down to the purchase order module. So the way that I see, go to programs and do a purchase order entry. So what someone would have to be trained to do in the pure water world, let's just say, okay, make a batch. Now, the funny thing about purchase orders is, normally, if I'm doing job-related purchase orders, in the project management module, there's a PM purchase order. And remember yesterday, I showed you guys that the subcontract on each project in project management would give you a list of all the subcontracts specific to that job. The purchase orders is the same thing. I got a PO log in PM that would give me a list of all my purchase orders for that project. But since I'm buying purchase order stuff in the inventory, I'm not going direct to a project. I'm going to the warehouse because I'm going to inventory in step 2. I'm going to be divvying up to my jobs in step 2. Okay? So hit enter. Enter.
oh, just enter.
Oh,
Sorry.
And
yeah, enter plus will get you there. So we can start at any number and just increment. The project purchase orders usually have a job number embedded, but these ones just are the next incremental number because there's no job involved. Enter. F4. Do you know any of the pure water vendors off the top of your head?
Dr. Reese's,
Okay.
Dr. Reese's?
RESYS. Reese's Incorporated. Yeah,
Okay.
It's Dr. Watt.
Dr. David E. Watts.
Yeah,
and-
David E.
yeah.
Watts.
That's what I was.
Weird stuff.
That combination.
I was like, okay,
Uh,
how's it coming in?
He calls himself a doctor.
Description, we could just call this PW items because down below we're going to itemize that we're going to get. Now, in the inventory, come down here, put 201, and we can hard code that, but hit F4. This is my location, so I'm buying stuff into stock, into location number 4, okay? I'm ordering it today, ordered by the person who put their initials in there. If they wanted to go down to ship location. Is that any good? Go to ship location, please. Down to the bottom. Hit F4. Well, actually cancel out here. I believe since we have a shipping location, hit save up there. Hit the shipping tab. Okay. Remember we put the shipping location in here. If this was a hot item, hey, call Will upon delivery, at cell phone number, la-di-da-di-da, or something, if it was a hot ticket item. Okay, so now here's my header. Now let's go pick some items. N or plus will give me my extra new item. Okay, the type is going to be inventory. So instead of going direct to the job, I'm going into inventory. Now, it knows what location is going. Now hit F4. Those are the materials that the 366 items are now in your inventory location. Go ahead and pick a couple things. We'll just grab 10 of these and, 20 of these or whatever you want to do. We're adding quantities on hand to a zero balance as
So
well.
you just have to pick one at a time, or can I pick
Yeah.
multiple?
Okay, so now that 2450 is pre-filling from that price that came in, but I can override it if I want. So let's say I need 10 of those babies, that's going to cost, so now we're kind of negotiating the price. If we're keeping the price list up to date, that would be a good price, wouldn't it? But now if it was $25, that average cost would bump it a little bit because it would be more than the price list, but since Will imported the price list in here, we're feeling pretty good that that's the latest and greatest price, if that was up to date. Correct? Okay, so now, go back to the grid here. Now, people that like, go ahead and say yes. It just wants to say, now, people who like the grid view, we can go ahead and this is where you got to kind of have one item, your purchase order, you can put things into different locations, etc. N would be the next or a new one. Enter, hit F4 on your materials, and just grab something else. We're just kind of testing around here, off about 366. How many of them, baby? She says, I want 10 of those too. And now here's where that tax was coming into play. If we scroll over here, we were kind of bypassing the tax codes, you know, those 4-digit tax codes that you're working on. If these things did have tax, then it would be adding that percentage of tax that you're going to put on that thing to each price. And because that checkbox in our inventory settings will say include the tax in the unit cost, it would be more than 35.40. It would be 35.40 plus the tax per unit. Does that make sense?
So if I was to select this and we had sales tax, then it would
Hit
require.
F4. That's where you grab
That's where
it.
I have that tax.
That's where you're going to put your 4-digit tax code, and it's going to know that percent that you put on there, so it knows how to do that, and it will report that. Okay. So that's kind of our.
So if we don't select anything here, then it won't require the tax code.
No tax. When the invoice comes, the item prices should be the same, but that little tax subtotal wouldn't be popping in from Vista. It would be on the invoice if it wasn't a tax exempt certificate, but we wouldn't have the knowledge to calculate it in advance. But we could if we had everything up to date. Okay? So basically, I could add as many things into inventory location 4 as I would want, because I'm purchasing into stock at this thing, because I'm putting stuff into stock. Okay? File, process batch, validate, preview. Okay. Now this is the receiving functionality. When it comes time to do this, we must receive. So all this is doing is saying, hey, we didn't do tax, I'm buying 10 of these. It's recapping what you see right here for those things. So this is just a purchase order recap. These are audit reports that are being saved with the system. Cancel out of here. Into inventory, it's going to itemize and put those on order. The truck hasn't showed up yet, so they're not in stock, but the system knows that they're on order. Okay? So go ahead and cancel out of there and post. Okay? So at this stage of the game, close out of here, come back to Vista, hit that thing, hit refresh. Did you happen to buy one of those top ones? Do you remember?
Yeah.
Hit the cost quantities tab. Hit refresh one more time.
I thought I selected it.
Click into the material here.
I think it was the same.
Now start scrolling a little bit. You'll see, there's 10 of those on order, okay? And if you hit next, you'll find that there's 10 of that other one. But they haven't received it yet because we haven't went through the receiving functionality. So at this point in time, Don's sitting over there on the loading dock waiting for the truck to come in because I need 10 of those babies, and once I receive them, they'll go into stock. Okay? So basically, this is the functionality of inventory, is now the system knows they're on order.
So how do we proceed?
Let's do it. Okay? So let's cancel out of here. So PO initialize receipts. And once again, this is your audit trail. Okay? Will's a busy man. He's sitting on the dock with Don, hanging out, waiting for those things. Hit F4. Let's reference open POs. Where's my, hit cancel. I gotta show you something. This is important. Purchase order entry. Okay. Say okay, create a new batch. So what I didn't do, file, add purchase order. Hit F4. Basically what I'm telling Vista is, give me back purchase order 10,000 and add them to the batch. Do you want to include all those items? Yeah, because Don didn't. Do you want to fix anything else? No. Okay. Now there's a powerful little checkbox. Go to the grid view here. You see that little receiving thing?
Oh, so it requires you to receive it?
Yes, no. This is a yes, no checkbox.
So you don't have to receive it.
So if you check that, remember I went and looked for that purchase order and the system's like, Don, you didn't tell me to receive against that. So I'm not looking for a receiver for a packing slip, a delivery ticket, whatever you want to call it to that. So let's go ahead and check those two boxes. So imagine these purchase orders, this is going to be another business policy that you guys are going to have to talk about is when do we want to require packing slips, delivery tickets, and when do we not? Certainly, when we put stuff into inventory, we have to, okay? Because to receive, you have to receive that into inventory. So for purchase orders that go directly into inventory, we must check those two boxes. The question is, when I go to a job, are you going to require packing slips to come back to Vista so that you can get that information? Because I will
receive at all.
you can decide that on a purchase order by purchase. This is a yes, no thing. That receiving functionality is optional. As you can see, if I don't check it, I can't receive it against it. I can't put a purchase, could I? I tried to pull it up and the system was like, Don, you never told me you wanted to receive against invoice 10,000, so I'm not going to let you. But when we repost that.
Maxwell, it's global, and we've had some issues because at the job site, sometimes when they don't receive or keep track of it, and there's back orders, and then they don't know they're short until, you know, they're getting ready to stage the material the next day, and then they realize it's short. And
as a general rule, do you like to receive? Do you get the packing slips?
Not that we like to.
Stacy would like to personally receive everything, but do we have the manpower for it? Is
That's usually a big thing, you know, or if the guys take the paperwork to the bar after work and spill beer on it, never makes it to the home office, then you can't, how can you receive something you never got? You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we've
So
had some
that paperwork
challenges.
has to get to the
Well, we're
back
not
office.
receiving off of packing slips. We usually don't receive until we get an invoice.
Right, but back in the day, in the true nature of receiving, we used to actually try
You're
to
entering the packing slip.
count and receive
As an
off
interim
an actual
step.
packing slip.
Yep.
Then when that became hard to tackle, because that's exactly right. I mean, guys would literally bring us stacks of, because they used to have to turn in all their packing slips. And they would literally bring us a stack and they would be covered with mud and coffee and who else knows, you know, like a week's, I mean, they used to like mail them in and bring them in and, you know, and so there would be a week later and it was just holding up the process.
I mean, it would be something,
We used to send envelopes to the job site and all sorts of weird things.
if we, I mean, so for pure water,
Inventory is a no-brainer.
if it's actually being purchased into inventory, then only make it a requirement that the receiving function only comes into play when you're actually receiving into inventory, especially if you want to potentially move towards really tracking it in the inventory system.
Yeah, it's going to be a bigger conversation because Stacy has in her mind right now that she wants to implement all POs by line item and everything gets received
I
by
think there's
line
still a
item.
question on that for the.
And I know that we haven't implemented or made a change in the policy, but that is something that she'd like to implement.
Cool.
But it's just understanding the staff that it would take to.
So let's go ahead and do that.
So what if I had 50 items, line items though, on this PO?
Yeah.
Do you have to check each one for receiving or is there a way to check all?
What would happen would be, click in your receiving, hit F3. This is a nice feature. And you could go system-wide if you wanted to, type previous value. Because the previous value will, if you choose it on the first one, it'll subsequent down. Fixed value says, I want it always. So if we said yes and put in a fixed value, it would do it every time for everyone. So if the boss has the power of saying, yes, we're going to receive, we can go put in a fixed value of yes, and it will default to yes every time. That will require receiving all the time. This one, if I put previous value, whatever you put on the first one will propagate down as I create extra items. So that's the previous value versus a fixed value of do it every time. But if the boss says do it every time, I'm F3 overriding that and I'm putting a fixed value of yes. and it will
I
default every
think there's
time.
going to be times when it makes sense and there's going to be times when it doesn't, so that's a topic for discussion still.
So it'll pre-fill, so I went and closed, now do an N, do a new one there. Enter. Oops, oops, click on that one more time. Hit F3. System overrides. Previous value.
Is it?
I might have to go out of there and come back in,
in.
but cancel that, but that has to be checked. Go ahead and hit, oh, how many of those do you want? So like I said, I could also pull it back and say, oh, by the way, I wanted, I forgot these, and let's have 10 of these, or whatever you want to grab, okay? Now let's post this. Now when we process, validate, if you preview, it'll say, hey, just change 2 items, but added a 3rd item on this thing. So it's not going to, because old, new, but added just 1 item. Just change the checkbox on the other 2 and post. So now, yeah, so this is the key thing. You can select receiving yes or no on a purchase order by purchase order basis. So now when we initialize receipts and look for Mr. 10,000 POD or look up please, now since we're receiving that, it's available. Now this is where you actually put in the packing slip number. So I'm holding some sort of delivery ticket in my hand and you're putting in that. And maximize this for just a second so you can see what's going on. So now, if you said, hey, I got 10, 10, and 10, the easiest way would just be to click receive all. And it said receive this time 10, 10. But maybe on these UV lamps, well, go ahead and receive all. And let's say maybe 8 showed up. So 8 of the 10, enter. Now 2 are on back order. So that's the functionality people are looking for is, hey, what didn't come, you know? So on this one, we ordered 10, 10, and 10, but only 8 UV lamps showed up. For whatever reason, I called them, they said they were there, and then they showed up, and oh, we got to get those from the company over in Renton, and they'll, you know, have it over, yes, tomorrow or whatever. But now the system knows there's 2 on backward, that's it. And, you know, 10, 10, and 10 will not go to a stock, because only 8 showed up at the ramp, okay? Because that's what the packing slip is telling me. So, okay? So hit update. And then hit F4, I could grab another one, so I could do a whole batch of them. I don't have any other purchase orders that are set to receiving, but I could do a whole bunch at the same time.
So do you have the ability in here if you wanted to attach the packing slip, could you?
Yeah, that's what that little attachment would have done. So,
Oh, attachment,
Yeah.
okay.
yeah. So let's post this batch. Remember, anytime you create a batch, and there's lots of batching going on in Vista, you must post that batch. Validate, preview, post. I want everybody to preview. Later on, once you get way more comfortable with Vista, you'll understand and you won't be previewing so much, but certainly through the testing stages, I want you to know what's happening to this batch. Where's it going? What accounts are it hitting? How's it hitting my system? It's a learning curve thing. You figure out how the system works.
What if we receive against the invoice and the prices don't match up when we hit the receive all?
There's some settings in AP that you can control. This does that invoice because we're not at the invoice level yet. Does that make sense? We're still at the packing slip
So
So this
receiver
is
level.
just packing slip receiving?
Receiving. This has
That's it.
nothing to do with invoicing. This
Okay.
is an interim optional step.
Okay.
People call it a 3-legged match. Your purchase order, your receipt, and your invoice. That's the 3-legged stool that people look to reconcile. That receiving is an optional thing. I can go directly from the purchase order to the invoice, but then I'm doing some sort of internal validation because I don't have a receiver in the system that understands what's going on. You with me on that?
Yeah.
Okay. So now this is just saying, hey, in the inventory, I received 10, 10, and 8 because those 2 are on back order because we just didn't receive all of them, okay? And post. So at this point in time, I'm updating my quantities hands on inventory. So if you pop down here, let's go to inventory programs, location materials, please. Oops, next one right down below. The location materials, and so Now, quantity on hand, you could certainly reorganize these things. What you want to do is scroll to the right. In the grid view, a lot of times you've got quantities on hand. So now I've got received, not invoice, but I've got 10, 8, and 8 on hand that have my audit trail. And it knows that I haven't invoiced yet, but I've received them and stuff like that. So I can move some of these columns over there if they're a little more relevant and stuff like that. But a second ago, those things were on order. I still got 2 on order because they were back ordered, but it knows that I've got 8 sitting in my warehouse right now, and 2 of them are still on order because we partially received on that receipt, and the two widgets were on back order. Okay. So that's kind of what's updating the whole inventory, and that's why you've got negative quantities on hand in Maxwell, is because you keep putting things out to the job, but you never got any numbers in there to offset it, and Vista would be doing the same way. I think if we started testing a bunch in here and throwing stuff out of stock without putting enough in. Okay.